What happens when a woman confronts Melania Trump in a shopping mall, shouting accusations and spewing hatred? The answer will leave you speechless. It was a quiet afternoon in the bustling mall, the kind of place where shoppers lazily drift in and out of stores, enjoying their weekend. But for Melania Trump, it would soon become a battlefield. She entered the high-end shopping center, looking as poised and composed as ever. Dressed casually, without the usual media frenzy, she hoped for a normal day. A day away from the cameras, but normal was about to be shattered. As she walked through the entrance, a woman in her late 30s standing near a luxury store caught sight of Melania. Without a second thought, she muttered something under her breath, followed by a loud, unmistakable exclamation that echoed through the marble floors. "Look at her! The nerve! Shopping like she's one of us!" Melania paused, her heart sinking, but she kept walking, pretending not to hear. She had faced this kind of thing before, people who judged her based on nothing but assumptions. But today felt different. The woman's voice was piercing, filled with something darker than just casual disdain. It was hatred. Before Melania could reach the next store, the woman stepped directly in front of her, blocking her path. "What are you doing here?" The woman sneered. "Aren't you too good for a place like this?" The crowd around them started to take notice. It was the kind of moment that everyone knew would spiral out of control. The atmosphere turned tense. People took out their phones, sensing the confrontation. Melania didn't flinch. She stood still, her eyes calm, but a deep sense of injustice began to grow within her. The woman was relentless, her voice rising. "You don't belong here. We all know who you are." Melania took a breath. She could have walked away. She could have called security, but she didn't. Instead, she stepped closer to the woman. Her voice was soft but firm. "I am no different from you." But the woman wasn't ready to listen. The venom in her words grew sharper. "You'll never be one of us. You'll always be just." And that's when something happened that no one could have predicted. The woman's sentence was cut short by Melania herself. Without warning, Melania raised her hand, but not in anger. Instead, she gently placed her hand on the woman's shoulder, her expression calm yet filled with a quiet power. The crowd watched, wide-eyed, unsure of what to expect. "Look at me," Melania said softly, her voice steady. "You don't know me. You don't know my story." For a moment, the woman froze. Her eyes locked onto Melania's, the biting words still hovering in the air. It was as if Melania's presence, the stillness of her gaze, disarmed her in a way that words never could. Melania spoke again, this time with a depth that commanded attention. "We all have struggles. We all have challenges. But what we say to others, the way we treat people, that defines who we are." The woman, now visibly thrown off balance, tried to pull away. But Melania's touch remained, firm yet gentle. The onlookers around them were starting to murmur, some unsure whether this would escalate into an argument or end in something unexpected. The woman began to shake. Whether from the weight of Melania's words or the scrutiny of the crowd, it was hard to tell. "You're upset," Melania continued, her tone sympathetic. "And I understand. But your words, they only hurt you, not me." The woman's face reddened, and for a brief second, there was hesitation in her eyes. For a brief second, it was as if Melania's kindness had cracked the armor of her hate. But then something changed. The woman recoiled, her fists clenching. "You think you're better than me?" she snapped, her voice rising again. But there was a tremor in it now, a sign of doubt, perhaps even regret. Melania didn't flinch. Instead, she stood there, still, composed, and without a trace of fear. The moment was building up, the crowd bracing for the next act of drama. But what happened next was even more surprising. The woman, now visibly trembling, took a deep breath and tried to pull herself together. She shot one last furious glance at Melania, ready to unleash another round of insults. But before she could speak, something completely unexpected happened. A small voice cut through the tension. It was a child no older than 8 or 9, standing near the crowd of onlookers. The little girl stepped forward, her gaze locked onto the woman who had just been so venomous. "Why are you being so mean to her?" the child asked, her voice innocent but piercing, carrying a weight that silenced the room. Everyone turned to look at the girl. The woman, stunned by the unexpected intervention, was momentarily taken aback. The crowd, too, seemed caught off guard. The atmosphere shifted. This wasn't just a confrontation anymore. It was something more profound, a moment of reflection and self-realization for everyone involved. The woman looked down at the child, her face hardening for just a second. Then something changed. Perhaps it was the child's innocence, or maybe it was the way Melania's calm demeanor had begun to permeate the tension. The woman's shoulders slumped slightly, and her anger began to fade. Melania's gaze softened. "She's right. I've faced hate in many forms, but love always makes a bigger impact." The woman's eyes darted around the room, as if searching for an escape. The crowd was waiting for her next move, anticipating another outburst, but this time, she couldn't find the words. She simply stood there, her fists clenched, as if caught in an internal struggle. And then, to everyone's surprise, the woman did something no one had expected. She let out a long, shaky breath, and her shoulders visibly dropped. The fire in her eyes dulled, replaced by a sudden vulnerability. For the first time in this entire encounter, she didn't seem like an antagonist anymore. She seemed human. The moment stretched on, the entire shopping center holding its breath. But what happened next would leave everyone speechless. As the silence lingered, Melania took a small step forward, her presence commanding but not overwhelming. She looked at the woman, her eyes steady and kind. "You don't have to carry that anger," Melania said quietly. "It's not too late to choose kindness, to choose peace. It's never too late to change." The woman's eyes filled with uncertainty, as if Melania's words had cracked through the hardened shell she had built around herself. The anger, which had once seemed so absolute, began to unravel piece by piece. She looked down at the ground, her fists slowly unclenching as if the weight of her emotions was finally becoming too much to bear. I don't know what happened," the woman stammered, her voice breaking. "I don't even know why I said those things. I'm sorry." The crowd, which had been holding its breath just moments before, began to murmur in disbelief. No one had expected this turn of events. It was as though the entire confrontation had been building up to this pivotal moment. A moment of reconciliation, a moment where hatred was replaced with an unexpected softness. Melania smiled gently, her expression filled with empathy. "It's all right. We all make mistakes. What matters is what we choose to do next." The woman looked up at Melania, her eyes now filled with a mix of shame and relief. She took a hesitant step forward, as if unsure of how to proceed. But Melania's warmth was undeniable. "Thank you," the woman whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know if you'll ever understand, but you made me see something in myself I never knew was there." Melania nodded slowly, her gaze unwavering. "We all have the capacity for change. It just takes a little courage." The woman took another deep breath, and for the first time since the encounter began, a real smile flickered across her face. It was small, but it was there. A smile that spoke of newfound humility, of an inner shift that no one had anticipated. The crowd, who had been watching the exchange in stunned silence, slowly began to applaud. It wasn't just a clapping of hands, it was an acknowledgement of something much deeper. It was the recognition that this encounter had shifted something in the atmosphere. Something that had once been tense and divisive was now filled with hope and understanding. But this wasn't the end of the story. No, this moment would be remembered, not for the confrontation, but for the unexpected transformation that had taken place before their very eyes. As the applause continued, Melania stepped back, her face calm and serene. Her mission accomplished. She had faced the hatred head-on, and with nothing more than a few thoughtful words had turned it into an opportunity for healing. The woman, still standing before her, seemed lost in thought. She appeared almost dazed by the encounter, her hands shaking slightly as if trying to process the weight of her own actions. The people around them began to slowly disperse, whispering among themselves about what had just transpired, but their eyes remained fixed on Melania. There was something magnetic about her presence in that moment, something beyond beauty or fame. It was the quiet strength of a woman who had seen the worst of the world and still chose to bring light to it. Her poise wasn't just for the cameras or the public. It was an authentic reflection of her character. The woman, her voice barely audible, spoke again, her words coming with an awkward sincerity. I've never met anyone like you, she confessed. I thought you'd fight back. I thought you'd be angry, like I was. But you didn't. You stayed calm. Melania looked at her with compassion, her voice soft yet firm. Anger only fuels more anger, she explained. It can't solve anything. I've learned that sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. The world doesn't need more fighting. It needs more understanding. There was a long pause as the woman absorbed Melania's words. Finally, she exhaled, as if a great weight had lifted from her chest. You're right, she whispered. I was angry for so long, but now I just feel tired. Tired of carrying this around. Melania nodded, her smile warm, yet tinged with understanding. You don't have to carry it anymore, she said. Let go of it. You deserve peace. For a moment, the two women stood there, surrounded by the soft buzz of the shopping mall that seemed almost distant now. The crowd had dispersed, leaving only a few lingering onlookers, some of them visibly moved by the interaction. In this brief moment, it felt like time had stopped. As the woman turned to leave, she paused, her gaze locking with Melania's one last time. Thank you, she said simply, but her words carried so much more. There was a new sense of respect in her eyes and something else. Gratitude for a chance to change, a chance to choose a different path. With that, the woman walked away, her steps lighter than they had been moments ago. The transformation that had occurred wasn't just in her. It had reverberated through the crowd, through the air, and Melania stood there watching her go, a quiet but powerful smile playing at the corners of her lips. This wasn't about the confrontation anymore. It was about a seed of kindness planted in the unlikeliest of places, blooming into something beautiful. As Melania continued her walk through the mall, the weight of the encounter began to settle in her heart. The energy around her seemed to shift, and it felt as though a wave of calm had washed over the entire space. The atmosphere was different now. No longer tense, the once hostile environment had transformed into one of quiet reflection. People who had witnessed the altercation moments before were now approaching her, some with timid expressions, others with admiration in their eyes. It was as if they had just witnessed a small miracle unfold before them, the kind of moment that restored a little bit of faith in humanity. An elderly man who had been standing nearby when the confrontation began walked up to Melania. His steps were slow but purposeful. His voice when he spoke was filled with gratitude. I don't know what you said to that woman, but you've reminded me of something important today, he began. That we're all human. We all make mistakes. And sometimes it takes someone like you to show us the way. Melania paused, taking in his words, her smile never faltering. She had known from the beginning that her purpose here wasn't just about the woman who had attacked her. It was about everyone who had witnessed it, everyone who had been impacted by the exchange. She knew that what happened in that small, fleeting moment could ripple out to change hearts. Thank you, she said softly, her voice warm, yet firm. I believe in second chances, for all of us. The elderly man nodded, his eyes misting with emotion. He placed a hand on her arm, a silent gesture of support before turning to leave. But Melania could feel the weight of his appreciation long after he had disappeared into the crowd. As she walked on, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from her team. Press inquiries about the incident were already flooding in. But Melania wasn't worried. She wasn't interested in the media frenzy. What mattered to her was the quiet but profound effect she had just had on the people around her. The true impact was not in the headlines. It was in the hearts of those who had witnessed the exchange. A woman standing by the coffee counter caught her eye and smiled. She approached Melania with an air of shyness, but there was a warmth in her eyes. Excuse me, Mrs. Trump, but I just wanted to say that what you did back there was incredible, she said. I've never seen someone respond with so much grace. You showed us all that there's a better way to handle conflict. Melania's eyes softened. It's not always easy, she replied, but it's worth it. The woman nodded, her voice barely a whisper as she added, You've inspired me to be kinder, to not let my anger control me anymore. Thank you for a moment, Melania felt as though time had slowed down once again. The simple, quiet words of the woman had a profound effect on her as well. She had never set out to be an example to anyone, but here, in this bustling mall, it felt like she had become exactly that. A reminder that compassion and understanding could bring about real change. Just as she turned to continue her walk, another voice called out her name, followed by the soft click of a camera. The media had arrived. The moment the camera flashes started popping off, Melania instinctively straightened her posture. It wasn't the first time she'd been thrust into the spotlight, but today felt different. There was no drama, no confrontation, just a quiet grace that spoke volumes. The press had finally arrived, and they were eager to catch a glimpse of the woman who had just turned a difficult situation into something remarkable. "Mrs. Trump, could you please explain what happened back there?" One reporter called out, pushing through the crowd to get closer. The questions began to flood in, each reporter trying to capture her reaction, her thoughts on the altercation. Melania paused for a moment, collecting her thoughts. She wasn't interested in fueling a media frenzy. Instead, she decided to address the situation with the same calm and poise she had shown moments ago. "It wasn't about the incident," she began, her voice steady, each word measured. "It was about how we treat one another. Every person, no matter their background, deserves respect and understanding. We all make mistakes, and sometimes we need a gentle reminder that kindness has more power than anger." Her words, though simple, were powerful. They carried a weight that could not be ignored. The reporters fell silent, some looking at each other, unsure of how to follow up on her response. This wasn't the reaction they had anticipated. They had expected a scandal, a back-and-forth exchange. But what they had received was something far more impactful, a lesson in grace. Another reporter, clearly taken aback by her composed answer, spoke up. "Are you saying that this incident, what happened with that woman, was about teaching us all a lesson?" Melania nodded slowly. "Not just about that woman, but about all of us. We're all capable of change. We're all capable of compassion. What happened here today wasn't just a confrontation. It was a chance for everyone to see that we can choose a better path." There was a beat of silence as the reporters absorbed her words. No one was sure how to respond, and for a brief moment the frenzy that usually surrounded her seemed to fade into the background. From behind the camera flashes, a voice broke through the quiet, a voice that stood out among the crowd, clear and assertive. "You have every right to be upset, Mrs. Trump. That woman shouldn't have said those things to you. How do you feel about her apology?" Melania's gaze shifted toward the voice, and for the first time she acknowledged the woman who had instigated the altercation. She stood at the back of the crowd, her face flushed with embarrassment. It was clear that she was struggling, unsure of how to react now that the confrontation had been diffused. "I understand that she's sorry," Melania said softly, her voice steady but kind. "We all make mistakes. What matters now is how we move forward from here." The woman, visibly shaken, stepped forward, her eyes meeting Melania's. I didn't mean to hurt you," she stammered. "I was angry, and I took it out on you. I'm so sorry." Melania met her gaze, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded. Apology accepted. It wasn't just the woman's words that made the moment significant. It was the courage to admit wrongdoing, the willingness to open up to a path of reconciliation. And Melania, in turn, had offered the ultimate act of grace, forgiveness. As the woman quietly left the scene, the crowd began to disperse. The media had gotten their moment, but the story they had captured wasn't one of conflict. It wasn't a scandal. It was a story of empathy, of strength through understanding. It was a reminder that kindness, in its purest form, could change the course of an entire day. With a final glance around the bustling mall, Melania turned and walked toward the exit. The weight of the world hadn't been lifted from her shoulders, but in this moment it felt lighter. The small gestures, the quiet strength, were enough to make a difference. Not just for her, but for everyone who had witnessed it. The day wasn't about Melania Trump. It wasn't even about the woman who had attacked her. It was about a moment of human connection, a moment where kindness had triumphed over hate. As Melania stepped out of the shopping center, a sense of calm settled over her. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm golden hue across the sky. And for the first time that day, she felt at peace. She had faced an unexpected attack, but instead of reacting with anger or bitterness, she had chosen to take the higher road. And in doing so, she had not only disarmed a situation that could have spiraled out of control, but also sent a powerful message to those around her. Outside the mall, a crowd had gathered, some eager to catch a glimpse of the former First Lady, others simply curious about the commotion. Melania, still composed, walked with her head held high, as if the earlier altercation had never even happened. She didn't need to say anything more. Her actions had spoken volumes. But then, just as she reached the car waiting for her, a voice called out from behind her. "Mrs. Trump, are you sure you're okay?" a young woman asked, rushing up to her. Melania stopped in her tracks, turning to face the woman. There was genuine concern in her eyes, and Melania could see the empathy in her expression. It was a reflection of what she had just experienced, a moment where people, despite their differences, were willing to extend kindness and understanding. "I'm fine," Melania replied with a soft smile. "Thank you for asking." The woman nodded, and for a brief moment they stood there, locked in a shared understanding. It wasn't about the headlines, the media frenzy, or the harsh words that had been exchanged earlier. It was about the human connection, something simple yet powerful that could turn a negative situation into a catalyst for change. As Melania got into the car and it drove away, the world around her seemed to fade into the background. The story would soon be told, across news outlets, social media platforms, and in living rooms across the country. But in the end, the true lesson of the day wasn't about the confrontation or the apology. It was about the way people treated one another in the aftermath. It was about how a single moment of grace could shift the narrative, even in the most unexpected of circumstances. Back in the shopping center, the woman who had lashed out at Melania earlier sat in a small cafe, her head bowed in reflection. She had apologized, but she still couldn't shake the feeling that she had learned something important, not just about Melania Trump, but about herself. In that brief exchange, she had been reminded that kindness, humility, and forgiveness weren't just virtues to aspire to. They were the very foundation of healing. As the days passed, the story of what had happened in that shopping center would fade from the headlines. But the ripple effect of Melania's composure, her ability to remain calm in the face of hostility, would stay with the people who had witnessed it. They would carry it with them, each person inspired in their own way to approach life with a little more kindness, a little more understanding. For Melania, it wasn't about seeking validation or approval. It was about leading by example, showing the world that even in the most challenging of moments, there was always room for grace. As the car disappeared into the distance, the mall behind her was just another memory, one that would remind everyone that sometimes the most powerful actions speak without words, and that in the end, kindness always wins. If you were moved by Melania's strength and grace, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories that inspire. Leave a comment below with your thoughts on how kindness can change the world, because sometimes the smallest act of compassion can make the biggest impact. Thank you for watching.